Welcome, advocates, to another episode of the Leading Equity Podcast, a podcast that focuses on supporting educators with the tools and resources necessary to ensure equity at their schools. Today's special guest is Jamee Herbert. So without further ado, Jamee, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure is mine. I'm looking forward to today's conversation. We're going to dig into some data today about early childhood. But before we get into that, I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself and what you currently do.
Yeah, so I'm Jamee Herbert. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called BridgeCare, provides data and technology infrastructure for early care and education, also known as ECE, also known as childcare and preschool. It goes by a lot of inconsistent terms, but that's where we spend our time, really birth to 5 primarily, and supporting at the system level to create really good software experiences for families trying to navigate the system, for the providers who offer subsidies, and all the folks who try to make the system work really well.
Great. Now I got a question. So do you primarily target or work with parents to make sure that they, I guess, have the right language or enough information as they make choices on care services? Is that what I heard?
So we never sell any products to families and childcare providers or like direct service providers. They are users of our systems. They're beneficiaries of our systems, but they use it for free. The people who pay us, who are our customers, are at the county, state, sometimes nonprofit level, where they're creating a system, a support system for their whole community. So a really common thing we do, for example, is provide the software for universal preschool. So if a state or a city offers universal preschool, they've passed legislation and they have funding. Places like the state of Colorado, the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts, they have universal preschool, and they use our software to allow families to apply, providers to register, place families, make sure they get paid, all those different parts of the system.
All right. So I'm more of a secondary guy. So I'm not familiar with universal preschool. Can you break that down a little bit more?
Yeah, it's actually not a consistent term, as nothing is in early care and education.
Okay.
But what it tends to be most agreed upon is that there's no income qualification. If a child meets the age criteria and they live in the specific geographic zone, then it is universally available. For example, in Colorado, all 4-year-olds have free access to preschool through the universal preschool program.
Okay. And so your organization creates the data to make sure that it's accessible, or to show why it's necessary?
The software. So like the family goes and they apply through the BridgeCare software. It's not called BridgeCare. It's called whatever that Colorado system, wants to call it. It's called white labeled, but they're interacting with our technology to get into the school that they want to go to.
Gotcha. Okay. So the software. So you created the software that organizations are utilizing in order. Okay. I'm with you now. Okay.
Yeah. We don't pay for it. Taxpayers pay for it. The universal preschool program. We don't provide the education. The school districts, childcare providers, community providers. It's a mixed delivery program. Most of our clients are mixed delivery programs, which means that multiple different kinds of providers of care and education are able to participate. And so families can more easily navigate those options through our software and then get placed in those programs.
Okay. All right. Thank you for indulging me for a few moments, because again, I am a secondary person. So I'm trying to figure out the early childhood stuff. I try to learn as much as I can. So, and I know folks listening out there, I can't be the only one that was curious.
No one really thinks about this part of the system. That's why I'm here. I'm excited to talk to you, because a lot of folks, think about there's not enough funding to pay teachers, and there's not, it's too expensive for families, and it is, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot that goes into how do we get to progress. And also, it isn't just about the funding. It is also about how does the system work? How do families even know what's available to them? How do they actually jump through the hoops? Like some of our clients, before they start working with us, the family has to fax their application, right? So those kind of things create very large barriers for families, even when the funding is available sometimes. So that's the world that we live in day in and day out.
Yeah, that's the world we live in. And there's a lot out there. So I'm glad that software is available out there, and so that folks are utilizing it. And it just got me thinking about policies, because universal preschool is a policy that is implemented. You said, for example, in Colorado. The question that I want to start off with is, why is it so important to make sure that we have real-time accurate data when we're trying to create or look into creating policies in early childhood?
Yeah. Well, one of our clients who I love to highlight them as an example of the value of data is the first class pre-K program in Alabama. It's for a very long time been ranked the #1 quality pre-K program in the country. That's primarily for 4-year-olds, although they've expanded it quite a lot and they have other birth to 3 programs and more now. But that program started by making the case for using a small amount of funding from the federal government to start a pre-K program. And then they prove with data the impact of reduced costs over time and the beneficial impact on the children who went through that pre-K program by 3rd grade. And because of the use of data to make that case, they have year over year over year expanded the program and are one of the highest, if not the highest quality program in the country. So the state of Alabama does not have the same reputation for their K-12 education system or their childcare system. Their pre-K program is really a testament to the use of data.
So okay. So I like that you said that, right? Because I wouldn't say that one more time. I don't think my audience heard you when you said that the early childhood program is, what I heard was essentially doing better than the K-12 structure. Is that what
I mean by rankings?
Okay.
That I don't do. I'm not a qualitative judge of program quality. We're a software company, but based on, the rankings of quality by experts, I don't know exactly where their K-12 system falls and their childcare system falls, but they don't rank #1 like their pre-K program does. And they are all run by different departments. Yeah.
Because how many times have we heard elementary teachers, oh, the early childhood folks, they're not preparing the kids for kindergarten or 1st grade, and then you get your middle school, oh, we'll see the elementary folks, this is why the reading levels are low, is the elementary folks aren't doing what they're supposed to do. And in the high school, the same thing, right? So what I'm hearing is for me, when I think about the importance of data and the importance of understanding why policies and utilizing data to create policies is so important, is because early childhood is the start, right? That is what sets the tone.
Yeah.
So if we're not starting off right, then we're playing catch up going forward.
Absolutely. And that's the case they made and why they've been so successful growing that program.
Okay. So that's one reason. Are there other reasons why collecting the data is very important when it comes to creating those policies?
Yeah, I think as somebody who has committed my life to, growing the impact of and investment in early care and education, I believe deeply in the need for that investment. Not all investment is equal, right? And so you can invest a lot of money, a lot of taxpayer hard-earned, hard advocated for dollars and not invest those wisely. That is possible, right? Not every pre-K program in the country has the same results in terms of long-term outcomes for children. And so how those programs are implemented matters a lot. And data is a really important, and not just in terms of pre-K programs, but just in general, having a solid understanding of where are the gaps. How can we efficiently use the funds we have? And then how do we track to make sure that those funds are being invested the best they possibly can? Because we currently live in a world of scarcity where there is not enough to go around. So we have to use those funds effectively. And hopefully it gets us to abundance in childcare and early education.
Okay. All right. So let's help me out and understand what type of data points are most common when it comes to looking at these policies. Is it maybe enrollment? Is social economics? What are some data points that you're seeing a lot?
Well, in childcare, there's just a complete dearth of data. It's just a complete absence. And it's really difficult, especially because in contrast to K-12, which is all receives, at least the public education system, all receives public funding. The childcare system is more of like a private market, kind of a controlled private marketplace. So some providers accept subsidy funding, but not all. So it's difficult or impossible. There are generally not requirements around a lot of data reporting from the childcare providers because they're just private businesses doing their thing, and there's no strict requirements. There's no carrot. It's very difficult to compel them to give that data to the state. So
why do you think that is? Why? I mean, again, we said starting early sets the tone. Why do you think this is the case?
Well, it's going back to your other question. It's another reason why data is so important because it helps us move past culture discrepancies and political, getting bogged down in politics. And it helps us just say, does this investment make sense? What are the outcomes? What is the ROI on this? Rather than, questions I've heard along the way in my journey with BridgeCare of like, well, don't moms just want to stay home anyway? Isn't it even sad that people have to work? I mean, like, there are just cultural questions that come up that we get bogged down in. Things of like just differences in morality or preferences around family raising, rather than just looking at what about child outcomes? What about the workforce? What about our economy, right? What about school readiness? When you look at the data, you see where there is a need, what the impact of that investment is, and you kind of can move past getting bogged down in the he said, she said, what do we think about childcare?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I didn't think about it until you started talking about it. It's you have a lot of legislators, for example, or folks that are in positions of power that create these policies that believe, a parent should, a lot of times women, the mom should raise the child. And then when they get to kindergarten or first grade, whatever it is, then it's up to the school at that point. They're okay with handing off. And then so there's a lot of mixed beliefs as far as, is it okay or the right thing to do to allow a caregiver, care provider to essentially raise children?
Yeah, and there's a historical divide between care and education. And I think what we know now so much more than we did when the system was created decades ago. All of that is the foundation, like you were saying, that, you're just playing catch up when you're in K-12 or higher ed. So that investment is worth it as a society. But yeah, we can get bogged down in other discussions when we lose sight of that.
Okay. So I know you mentioned that Alabama, for example, has a really strong, I forgot, what do you call it? First class program.
That's the name of it. First class pre-K.
First class pre-K.
I didn't name it that. Yeah.
So for example, I guess are they considered maybe the staple when it comes to following, like, this is the model program that we should look for? So I'm just thinking for individuals who are looking to run programs that are looking to make like some changes, things like that. Like, hey, I hear what Sheldon and Jamie are saying. Maybe it is time for us to kind of revisit some of the data and look at. Would you recommend like that program, or are there other programs that have some models that are like, okay, this is probably some folks that you want to look into as far as what they're doing in their programs?
Yeah, all of our clients run their programs a little differently. I think Colorado is another amazing example of really equity-driven program that really tries to balance family preferences, mixed delivery, and quality and funding. Alabama's program is not universal. That's just not the policy that's been passed there, but they do have quite a lot of seats for children. I think one thing that's really great about Alabama's program is that they fund the classroom. And so it gives a lot of stability to the care provider, the school, or the provider of education, because they know what funding they're going to get. It's not based on just how many children are in the classroom. It's actually funding the classroom so they can fund the staffing. And I think that's a huge part of what contributes to their high quality. A lot of it does just come down to staff turnover and adequately supporting with funding the workforce of care and education.
So did you say it's not necessarily the number of seats that are being occupied, it's more of just, this is how much money goes towards the class? Is that what I heard?
Yes.
So what I'm hearing, and I know it sounds simple to just say this, but it sounds like universal preschool it benefits everyone if we do that, but it just maybe just boils down to funding.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, everywhere, right? There's a huge, I would say, wave of momentum around funding, more funding toward preschool. Lots of states, Michigan, California, have large initiatives around expanding their pre-K programs for universal preschool, and cities too. We work with Multnomah County, where Portland, Oregon is. They have an initiative called Preschool for All that expands access to pre-K. Like I said, Cambridge, Massachusetts, the city has a tax to fund universal preschool. So not just at the state level, but local levels as well. Cambridge is an interesting example. They used to be just the Cambridge Public Schools, and they had a pre-K program, but they expanded it significantly. And when they expanded it, they made it mixed delivery because they needed more space for the children to go. There wasn't enough space in just the school district. So it's a mixed delivery program. And yeah, there's just a huge momentum to grow access to free, high quality preschool for 4-year-olds across the country.
Good. And I'm glad to hear that. Which makes me kind of want to shift gears a little bit, because I'm considering, like, a lot of our preschool programs, as you mentioned, are privately set up. So there's, often some sort of tuition or childcare fees, things like that are associated, which ultimately is going to impact negatively a lot of our lower income families, lower to no income families. And so I'm just curious, what is your take? What are your thoughts, information that you might have in regards to utilizing data to support families that are in those situations?
Yeah, well, it really, the early childhood education system, I'll say in quotes, because it's a non-system, and it's very much broken. It is essentially the childcare system. And again, it's a non-system, really. It depends on how much money the family makes. So for families who are, very low income, there is the child care subsidy system. So you can qualify for child care assistance, and preschool is an age group within childcare. So it goes up until kindergarten for full day care, and then usually beyond as well for after school care and things like that. So if you it's all income qualification based. If you make little enough money and you work and meet many other criteria, then, or you're getting education or something, then you can qualify for that assistance. Now, not all childcare providers accept subsidy and participate in that system. So when you talk about the best preschools, a lot of times they might not accept that public funding. So that's an equity discrepancy.
I was just about to say, it sounds like we got an equity issue.
Absolutely. Some providers will say that they do, but they don't really. There's generally no requirement to accept a family, so they can, because they're private businesses and they can kind of run them how they want and accept the children that they want. So it is absolutely an equity issue. And
they'll just do a quota too. We have 10 vouchers only, or only 5. You know what I'm saying? Like, they'll do it to, like, so they can say, oh yeah, we have folks that are on scholarships. But it'd be like 2 students that'd be on scholarships. You know what I'm saying? So those are some things that they're doing to kind of get away with or get over that.
There's the very real aspect that our childcare subsidy system often does not subsidize enough. So those businesses that accept subsidy are sometimes doing so as almost an act of charity, because they make less from the government than they do from full paying families. But almost nowhere does the subsidy compensate the full amount of the cost of care. Like, some will stated 80% of market rate, and market rate is already not enough to cover the true cost of care. So you're asking businesses, right? Business owners who need to keep the lights on, pay their staff, to just, for no reason other than that these families qualify, take a 20% cut on what they should be paid for their service. It's unheard of, right? It's like this, that doesn't happen in any other business. So there's a lot broken about the subsidy system. On top of it all too, there's a shifting now happening due to recent policy change, but that compensation is also based on attendance rather than what childcare providers usually do, which is just charge the full amount every month. Like, when my son was sick for most of the month of December, we paid the same amount for childcare as if he was there or not, right? That's how it works in childcare, because they have to staff regardless. But often the subsidy doesn't compensate the same. So there's a lot of ways that you can't even fault the childcare providers, right? The system is not supporting what the need is.
So what would be your suggestion then, Jamie? If the system is not supporting,
well, actually, they have moved. So the funding comes from CCDF at the federal government. They have moved to enrollment-based compensation, which will end up costing probably most states quite a bit more, but is the more, I would argue, equitable way to compensate for that. And it certainly is a better support for the childcare providers and their staff.
What is enrollment-based? What does that mean? What do you mean?
So instead of attendance-based, whether the child showed up that day, it's whether they're enrolled with the program.
Oh, okay. So then even if they don't, so then let's just say they missed 10 days of school, and I could see pushback coming from that direction. So help me understand how that could be more of an equitable solution.
Because if we don't compensate the way providers need to be compensated, they just won't participate. And then you just don't have enough places for families to go who qualify, right? Okay. So like we were talking about with like the best childcare providers or the best preschool providers, if you don't compensate adequately for their service, they're just not going to participate in the system. And that's an equity issue because then the families who qualify and can't pay outright won't have access to it at all.
Okay. I see what you're saying. I can just think, and I see what you're saying. Again, I'm learning. So I'm literally learning right now. So that's why I'm asking some of these kind of questions, because I'm thinking, okay, well, if we go enrollment versus attendance, then we can end up getting ghost families.
Yeah.
Meaning
yeah.
Okay.
No, that is the concern, right? Mm-hmm. But there are ways to look at that. I mean, confirm enrollment and have a certain threshold of attendance each month so that they're not just ghost families. All of our clients who do enrollment-based subsidy do have some kind of measure like that. But again, it's a question of staffing. You've got a school, right? You have a certain number of classrooms. You have to be able to pay that teacher. You have to be able to fund that classroom. The reality is we just have childcare providers going out of business. They're just leaving the field. Like we have a supply issue because we are not properly compensating for that cost of care in a way that's stable for them. And so they just leave. Like we have a workforce like flooding from the workforce. We will not have high quality care if we don't pay people who are educated, people who are able to sustain a living in a true field, right, that is valued and have stability in their income.
It's not just making sure that families have access, but it's also making sure that we have quality staff and we're compensating them for their services, which I think is just a general education.
They're inextricably linked. You can't separate the two, right? Access for families is providing support for the providers. You just don't have one without the other.
Okay. Yeah. It just sounds like there's a lot of you said the system is broken, but there's a lot that would need to take place in order for things to change. I can't even imagine what things were like during COVID times, like when folks were at home and all that stuff. So my thought was like when COVID happened, I felt like this is the perfect opportunity for education to kind of revamp itself and kind of go with the times. And so unfortunately, at least initially I saw some changes, and then it just kind of seems like we kind of just have gone back to the way things have always been.
I will say, I think in early care and education, which is super different landscape than K-12, there was a lot of progress because for the first time ever, there was actually a flood of funding for early care and education because it was critical for workforce, right? I mean, even in the first days of the pandemic, what did we need? We needed childcare because the schools were closed. So for the frontline workers, it was like, where are the childcare providers? They were allowed to be open only for essential workers. And so there was this spotlight on how critical childcare is that almost never actually receive that kind of respect or attention on that industry. So funding came along with it. Enough? I mean, arguably no, but it was more than they've ever seen before, right?
Okay.
And frankly, so much it was difficult to manage that effectively in such a short time because the systems weren't in place, and we're still seeing a lot of systems be put in place for that long-term funding. But I think a lot of smart decisions were made, particularly around systems and data, actually in that time, because they weren't there and they needed them in order to be able to know how to serve their communities.
Got you. Okay. Fair enough. All right. Well, I'll tell you this, Jamee. I've learned a lot. Thank you again. Thank you for your patience with my questions.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I love talking about this stuff.
So I appreciate that. But I'd love for you to share any final words of advice you want to provide to our listeners.
Yeah, I guess 2 words of advice. One is never underestimate the life of a human and in our society and the importance of that investment. If you already believe in the importance of early care and education, then I would say also don't underestimate the importance of the system itself and the way that these policies get implemented. Day in and day out, that's what I work on. And I see, kind of how the sausage is made and how important that final step is in making the system that, either emphasizes equity and supports a great experience for families and providers that truly values them, or misses the mark.
All right. Well, Jamee, if we have some folks that want to connect with you, what's the best way to reach you online?
LinkedIn is the best way to reach me. Or if you're just kind of interested in this topic and you can follow along, we post some thoughts about how to make the system better or success stories of things that are going on across the country. And yeah, I'm Jamee, Jamee Herbert. You can find me there.
There you are. Okay. And I'll leave some links in the show notes, folks. Jamee, it has truly been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.